This is GitOps, and it's Tuesday, so let's talk Terraform. I'm Olaf Gradin, a cloud architect by day and a technology advocate by night. I'm joined by Jason Ford, an IT platform consultant. Jason, what's the best thing about pizza?
I like the toppings. Actually, I worked at a pizza place when I was younger, so that was the best thing for me because I could eat pizza every day.
That's awesome, and you're absolutely right. 2 points. I'll let the folks at home keep track of those points for us. In the meantime, I believe you have a topic for us to kick us off. Let's get into it.
Okay. Um, I wanted to talk about how to get started with Terraform. Um, Basically, we're not going to get into talking about the specific providers yet. That's a future video, but just getting your environment set up so that you can even just get started is can be an entire challenge on its own. So you can use a Mac or a PC. It doesn't really matter. If you use Mac, you can use Brew to install Terraform. We'll include links below. And in the PC version, you can use Chaco to install it. That at least put the Terraform in the specific paths that you need. Or if you wanted to do it the old school way, just download Terraform from the actual website. But it'll make your life easier if you put the path in your environment variable.
You should probably get started with the latest version. So make sure that you're fetching the very latest to begin your effort. But then you need to, as part of your practice, you need to develop some sort of culture around ensuring that you're maintaining latest as well as possible. And that requires continual integration, constant testing. So again, this is GitOps, so you're going to have to develop some sort of practice around the automation of
Mm-hmm.
those tasks because you're not going to be able to keep up with it on your own. And when you talk about installing Terraform, so is it? Would you say it's a complicated piece of software? Like, does it require a real installation? You said pathing, but are there libraries and things that need to be available?
Um, Not yes and no. Installing Terraform on its own isn't hard. Like it's just a simple executable file. But if you're using each of the different providers, a lot of them require like Azure requires the AZ CLI to be installed to do a lot of the configurations and the initial credential setup. AWS does too. So you need to have each provider set up too. Um,
Prerequisites for each of the providers, then.
but it's not necessarily apparent if you're looking through the documentation for it.
Right.
And you're like, oh, I can't log in. Well, I need the CLI for that. You can also use Chaco and Brew to install those packages too.
Yeah, and I'm a fan of Winget on Windows, but Winget does not have Terraform within its library.
Oh, I have not tried that one yet. Um, so that's just getting Terraform installed. You should be able to pull up once you've installed it. Of course, close your terminals or your your CLIs, and then reopen them so that you can have them available for you just to type in. And um, next, what I would recommend is getting an IDE. IDE is the program that you use to do your development. Um, Something like Visual Studio Code, PyCharm. I think I've seen somebody use Atom before. I mean, that's like
I
running
used
on
to use
hard
Atom
mode.
actually.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, before I really committed to Visual Studio Code, I tried out Atom, and they were remarkably similar. But in the end, Visual Studio Code won out for me,
Okay.
so that's my personal preference.
Um, I like uh, I like PyCharm for it. Uh, I mean, it's just each person's different flavor. When I first started doing Terraform, Visual Studio Code plugin was pretty awful and didn't do
IntelliSense.
IntelliSense at all, and so it kind of didn't really work that well. And the IntelliJ PyCharm worked fine for that, and I just really haven't moved off. I can use both now, so you know, to each their
What's
own.
one of the biggest differences between VS Code and PyCharm?
Well, apparently there's a setting uh, that you can add to VS Code to autosave. Uh, when you are using PyCharm, it autosaves every time you like leave the file, make a change, things like that. But in Visual Studio Code, when you first start off, I ran into this the other day, it wasn't saving. So when I was creating Terraform for practice stuff, it wasn't updating because it said there's no new resources, even though I'm like, it should be there. And like, oh, I have to save the files here. Okay.
And that would be a challenging habit to get out of, I assume. If you're used to
Yes.
autosave and suddenly you have to be a chump and press Control S every time.
Well, you're just looking at like, especially if you're, what I was doing was a brand new install. So, is it, do I have it pointing to the right credentials? Do I have the right, there's a lot of things that could be going wrong. And I'm like, what is wrong? I'm like, oh, it's not saving. And then I saved and everything worked. You should also, I think, for your future state stuff, you should probably get, well, download Git because you're probably going to be checking code into different repos and things of that nature.
I think the truest statement about GitOps is that there will be no end of little programs and applications that you need to install and configure. The prerequisite list continues to go on.
Oh yeah, and they're constantly updating.
Yeah.
Azure, like we're not going to talk about buyers too much, but as you get comfortable with them, they're releasing a new version. Like Azure's releasing 3.0, and it says, good
That's right.
luck. It's like, okay, let's see how this goes. And even Terraform, when they update, um, you know, sometimes their big major versions change a lot.
I will point out that the executable design of Terraform is all inclusive. So rather than being an installer, kind of what I alluded to in the beginning, Terraform is just structured as a single redistributable. And as such, that file is 50 or 60 megabytes, I think.
Mm.
It's quite large for an executable. So you mentioned Git a little earlier. It's super important that you make sure that you set up a git ignore file if you're going to be using Git, because you don't want the various binaries that we're talking about to get pulled into the Git repository, especially being as large as they are.
When you do load those IDEs, you need like the plugins for Terraform, and once you install those, it should start doing autofills and things like that. Within Visual Studio, there's this little button here, Visual Studio Code. It's probably the same Visual Studio um, for extensions. So if you go into extensions, and you don't close it, you can search just for Terraform. And in my case, I have loaded the HashiCorp Terraform plugin. I'm not 100% sure what these other two are, but you just click install, and the plugin is installed onto your Visual Studio Code.
And do you have this in PyCharm as well?
I do. So inside of PyCharm, here's my fun little test project I was working on the other day. Inside of here, you go to settings, and there's plugins under settings. And then also you can search for Terraform and then click install. This one, at least, you have fewer options to pick the wrong one. And you just hit install, and then you're good to go. Like I said before, there's something important here. It allows you to do things like autofill. If you want to keep all, this is more advanced stuff, but it lets you add the required properties, and then you can start filling things in. So that's the nice thing about using those plugins, because you can pull it from the documentation and go through it, but the autofill is
IntelliSense is
nice.
our friend, right?
Yeah. Terraform to me is pretty easy to start with and learn. but it can get complex. But I think it's the best way to do most of the cloud providers.
Thank you, Jason, for helping us get started with Terraform. Jason and I participate in a Discord community called Learning Terraform, and we'd love to see you out there. There are lots of great use cases and discussions posted, and the community is active and always respectful. While this topic was foundational, questions can certainly range into more advanced topics. Join us on Discord or drop a note in the comments for something you'd like to see covered in future videos. Thanks.